Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in The Stream. Today, journalist and author Matt Taibbi joins us to discuss his new book on the life and death of Eric Garner, an unarmed black man who was killed in 2014 by a white police officer in the United States.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Those were Eric Garner's last words, spoken in desperation after a New York City police officer put him in an illegal chokehold that cost him his life. His final words became the rallying cry for the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S., formed in the wake of high-profile deaths of unarmed black men at the hands of mostly white police. Joining us now to discuss Eric Garner's life and the policies that he says led to Garner's death, Matt Taibbi, the author of I Can't Breathe, A Killing on Bay Street, and a contributing editor at Rolling Stone magazine. Welcome to The Stream, Matt. I want to start with two tweets from a person who's actually read your book. This is from Erica out of Arizona, who writes, reading Taibbi's Eric Garner book, I judge Garner too harshly, I think. She told The Stream her biggest takeaway, that I had judged him more harshly for not seeming respectable than was warranted. Now, Matt, you spent nearly 3 years writing about the life and death of Eric Garner. Tell our international audience, describe for us, who was Eric Garner?
Eric Garner was a small-time dealer in untaxed cigarettes. He was the father of 6 who had a criminal history. He had been in prison for dealing crack, but when he had gotten out, he was looking for something that was less dangerous and less likely to earn him prison time. His family had insisted that he tries harder to stay with them, so he was trying to get out of crime. But he found it hard to get a job, and so what he ended up doing was selling untaxed cigarettes, which is typically at most in New York a misdemeanor offense. He was a sort of big-hearted guy, very funny, contradictory, flawed, but well-liked everywhere. Everybody I talked to in the park liked Eric Garner, including the store owners in the area.
I pulled up a picture here, this from the New York Daily News, of Garner and his wife. Now, the video that we showed at the beginning of the program was the one that I think most people around the world recognize and know Garner by. This picture, maybe less so. You have all these anecdotes in your book that are really interesting. You have his pizza eating preferences. You have his spending habits or lack thereof. You have things about his knack for numbers. Out of those, or any other that made it through your book, what stuck out to you the most? What was your favorite anecdote?
Oh, people told me lots of funny stories about him right off the bat. The pizza thing is, I heard one of the first days was that he would go and order a whole pizza and fold it in half and eat it like a taco. So his eating habits were kind of legendary on the street out there. He also had this unbelievable facility with numbers. He was, to the degree that it actually kind of irritated some people on the street, he would go around challenging people to try to stump him about sports statistics and things like that, and he was always right. He would say things like, Google that if he was challenged about something. And about his clothes, he had, a little bit of a slovenly appearance, but there was a reason for that. He was kind of phobic about buying new things for himself. So because he wanted every dollar that he earned to go to his kids, so he would wear clothes until they almost literally fell off his body. But that's how he felt about his children.
So you know so much, and it comes across in the book with all of the interviews you've done with the people who made appearances in Eric's life, those who were in his neighborhood, his family members. Clearly was very well researched. What I wonder, though, was what was your inspiration behind this? What was it that sparked you to even get into researching Eric Garner's life? And was there any hesitation at all, given you're a white man?
Yeah, no, definitely. I had done a story, my previous book was about the criminal justice system. It was about why people on Wall Street don't go to jail. And then I was comparing, these guys who are doing billion-dollar frauds to people who do go to jail in this country and how they go to jail and why. So I was interested in the whole concept of community policing to begin with, and so that was sort of my initial interest in the case. And yes, I did have some trepidation about it as I went along, thinking, as a white person, as a white man, am I the right person to tell this story? But the more I thought about it, it's not just a book about Eric Garner and about the neighborhood that he lived in. It's also a book about the criminal justice system that killed him, about the bureaucracy that was behind that justice system and the politicians, and which were almost entirely a construct of white America. So it's a white story too, and I think it's important for people like me to own that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So I pulled up on my screen here one of the things that we saw circulating in the days after Garner's killing and since. This is from Franchisee on Twitter. Justice for Eric Garner, #I can't breathe. And you can see that illustration there was for his last words said several times, July 17, 2014. So that was caught on videotape, Matt. But tell us about the events leading up to this encounter with police this day. What happened?
Well, one of the amazing things that I found was that Eric Garner wasn't actually selling cigarettes that day. The evidence strongly suggests, and you can construct this even from police statements, but I also talked to probably 25 people who were there that day, and so I put together a timeline of what he was doing. And I know that he was unwell that day, that he spent most of the afternoon in a bathroom. He came out of a bathroom, he broke up a fight on the street, and then he was leaning up against a wall, catching his breath, when the police approached him. Now, what I think happened was that somebody like a lieutenant in the local precinct drove by earlier that morning, saw Garner, and then told these two sort of meathead cops to go pick him up. And so when they went back there, they had a mandate, they had a mission to arrest this guy who, unluckily for everybody involved, had not actually been committing a crime that day. So it was that shows up in the video, is that he's incredulous that you're arresting me now, when I'm not actually doing this, and that's what's so amazing.
I have this tweet here from Subhi, who of course saw that video and says, "These pictures disgust me. Absolutely no regard to the man's existence. So disturbing." Now, she tweets this October 26, 2017, of course, right now for our show. This happened nearly 3 years ago. I want to bring Melina Abdullah into the conversation now. She's professor and chair of Pan-African Studies at California State University in Los Angeles. Melina, welcome to the show. Now, we've seen these killings on camera time and time again. You were involved early on with the Black Lives Matter. Has anything changed, anything since this incident, since the killing of Eric Garner, that makes you hopeful?
Yeah, I mean, I get great hope from the way in which we as community members have rallied ourselves. We've claimed our own power. We've said we understand that the system of policing in this country is really designed to produce these outcomes. And so it's up to us as community members to imagine something that actually brings in a real safety for our community. So I think the conversations around, how do we create safe communities by having livable wage jobs, by having resources for communities, rather than pouring dollars into a policing system that's meant to brutalize and kill us.
So you mentioned the policing system. So with that, I want to bring in the voice of a former police officer, a detective. In fact, this is Derek Waller, a former Stream guest on a show about reforming the police from the inside. He's now retired, but this is what he told us about that policing system.
Broken windows. When I was a young officer, I used to think it would work, but as you grow in seniority, you see it doesn't work. I mean, the best thing that will work is an officer's judgment. Officer's judgment. I mean, somebody does something, small crime, sometimes the best advice is to give them a break. Sometimes they learn from that a break. You can't go locking up everybody for every single thing. It doesn't work. It's not going to improve the community. It's not going to improve community-police relations. It's not going to do anything but increase the numbers in the precinct. And that's basically what it stemmed from.
So Matt, he mentions there are broken windows, and that of course is a theory that by fighting smaller crimes, fixing things in neighborhoods, you could then detract and deter away from more serious crimes. Of course, it's been heavily criticized, but he is a police officer and an African-American one at that, says in the beginning he thought that was a good thing. How do you link that in with Eric Garner's death?
Well, Eric Garner had the misfortune to be a minor criminal at the time when these policies were being ramped up, and they were targeting people exactly like him. And so, you know, in an earlier period of history, I think police would have turned maybe a blind eye to somebody like him, or would have focused more on the drug dealers in the block or more serious offenders. But because of this statistics-based regime, and also coincidentally because of that specific incident on that day, you know, when those two officers were sent to pick him up, one of the things that was explained to me by another former officer was that you can't just tell the guy to walk around the corner in the new sort of broken windows era. You have to get a number, you have to get an arrest, you have to get proof that you did something. The whole regime is designed to create what they call activity, and so they needed to arrest him in order to satisfy the mission, and that was one of the problems.
And I think it's really important that we understand broken windows policing is not something new. It's something that has been, you know, there's a renewed commitment in a more extreme version of broken windows policing, but it's important that we understand that this is a concept that was ushered in 1982, right, where there was this theory that if we look at minor crime, we'll be able to clean up neighborhoods for gentrifiers. And I think what Matt does really well in the book is talk about the relationship between over-policing of Black, brown, and poor communities and the ushering in of kind of new gentrifiers into communities that we used to reside in. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about communities like Staten Island, communities in South Los Angeles, communities throughout urban America, is this notion that somehow broken windows policing is really fighting crime, when really who they're fighting is Black, brown, and poor people on behalf of white folks who are, you know, more affluent and want to move in and take over these communities.
I want to bring this this tweet in from Musi watching the show. He says, whole justice systems need to be reformed. Even Black officers targeted more minority drivers than white. So this is more than just discrimination, this person puts. But I want to bring this headline in next. This is from the Los Angeles Times. In New York, major crime complaints fell when cops took a break from proactive policing. That, of course, in quotes. And this is from September of this year. Matt, does this mean that the broken windows policies are changing? Do you see that happening at all?
Well, it means that the statistics are changing. You have to remember that it's everything that you hear about crime stats in a city like New York. You always have to take with a grain of salt, because the police are responsible not just for, you know, deterring crime. They're also responsible for monitoring and compiling statistics. So, like, for instance, one of the things with stop and frisk is, even though it's been struck down in court, and they claimed almost immediately that, you know, something like 95% of the stops had been done away with. You know, anecdotally, you'll hear on the street that they're still doing the same things. It's just that they're not filling out the forms anymore. So it's hard to really say. Is the answer.
Right. Policing isn't really changing. I think what Matt's pointing to is they're getting, as new rules come into play, individual officers and entire departments are getting kind of smart about how they play what they do. And so I think what's really required when we talk about creating safe communities, and I don't want to confine our conversation to just policing, because if we also look at the data, what creates safe communities is not spending more on police, it's actually investing in resources. If we look at Eric Garner, right, if we think about, well, what could have happened as a returning citizen if we poured resources into programs that could get him a livable wage job where he could support his 6 children, then, that would be a different outcome, right? If we could create conditions so the rest of the folks in the neighborhood that he found himself a part of could, have resources and really be able to do the work that they needed to do, then we would have a different outcome. Instead, we're pouring our dollars, and in most major cities, we're spending more than 50% of general funds, of tax dollars, on police, on straight up police. If we spent those dollars on after school programs, on jobs programs, on mental health resources, on health resources, we would have much, much safer communities. So I think in response to that tweet, it's not just about reforming police, it's about transforming the way in which communities spend their dollars and elevating humanity above all else.
Here's someone who might agree with you. This is someone watching live on YouTube. Mr. Apache says police should be made to attend public meetings with the communities they work in. Just one idea here, but we got a specific question. This is for you, Matt. This is from Aria, who says she hones in on one specific thing that came out of the killing of Eric Garner. The chokehold. She says, so how was the banned chokehold allowed? Why wasn't the abusive officer arrested, punished, or fired? Officers can do illegal techniques. This is an international community kind of watching this in the U.S., seeing this and wondering, how is this allowed to happen?
Sure, this is going to be a complicated answer because it's a convoluted thing to try to explain how the discipline process works with police officers, but typically internal police discipline has to wait for the criminal justice system to first play out. So in other words, they had to decide first whether or not they were going to arrest him and charge him with a crime before the police could discipline him and go through that process. So the case went to a grand jury, and they used kind of this ancient technique where they convened a special grand jury. They called 50 witnesses. And the suspicion is that they essentially put on a defense case during the grand jury, and months later the grand jury decided not to indict the officer. So that's how he wasn't arrested. The question of why wasn't he disciplined, well, the city did just uphold a complaint against him and rule that he did use a banned technique, but it's going to be a long time. They have to wait before the federal authorities decide whether or not to file charges, civil rights charges, before they can go through with the discipline.
I think that was a succinct answer. Thank you for explaining that for our international audience. Melina, go ahead.
And that actually varies from state to state and county to county. So in Los Angeles, it's actually the exact opposite, that the disciplinary process can happen first, and then the criminal process actually waits on that disciplinary process. What's common throughout the United States, however, is that the criminal justice process and the police disciplinary process are tied together, and they shouldn't be, right? So district attorneys, prosecutors are basically in bed with police departments. They rely on them for every other case. And so you have a reluctance on the part of prosecutors to prosecute police when they commit crimes, right? And you also have police departments that want to protect their officers above all else. So we still have Daniel Pantaleo really patrolling the same streets, working for the same department, where he is basically, he committed an act of terrorism on a neighborhood, and he's still out there on the streets, right? And that's common throughout the United States. Very, very rarely. I think last year there were 6 officers who were even charged in these killings of folks, right? And that doesn't mean that they were convicted. 6 charged, period. And so when you think about this, it really kind of makes communities, especially Black, brown, and poor communities, extremely vulnerable to police. There was, however, one arrest in the murder of Eric Garner, and it was the arrest of Ramsey Orta, the man who was brave enough, courageous enough to film the murder and bring it to the public's eye. So that's an additional injustice that we need to be aware of, that Ramsey Orta is in jail right now, and we need to think about the continued targeting of people who dare to step out.
And that, of course, you talked to Ramsey for a bit, and that's included in your book here. Of course, he's in jail on what the police say are unrelated charges and what he believes are related to his filming. The only reason we know about what happened to Eric Garner, some might say, is because it was caught on video. Here's a tweet from Sarah Murdoch, who says, please address social media coverage and the benefits and detriments of reproducing images of public violence against people of color. So a big topic there, but Matt, there's a catch-22 because we know about this because it was caught on video, but after this video, we've seen other videos and other videos, and then we hear that nothing happens. There are no indictments. Talk to us about the significance of this being caught on camera.
Well, I think it was very significant because before the cell phone age, the police just routinely denied that these things had happened. If Ramsey Orta hadn't been there that day, we would never have heard about this case because it would have been written up as somebody who was in poor health, who died of natural causes during a routine arrest. And people would never have heard of it. Because of the incontrovertible nature of these videos, I think it's forced everybody around the country to know to come face to face with what Black and brown communities have known all along, which is that this is routine and that these things are happening regularly. There's a significant moment in Ramsey's video where he kind of loses sight of Garner at the end, and you can see that he's kind of not focusing on it and not terribly worried. And the reason for that is that it happened so often that he didn't think it was an emergency. He had filmed a scene just like that a week earlier involving another guy named Jeff Thomas. I think the videos are crucial, but it's also important to dig deeper than the videos and understand the institutional framework behind them.
I want to read a comment we got via YouTube. I'll give this one to you, Melina. This is from Daniel. He says, I think that police violence is a problem everywhere. A couple of days ago here in Rio de Janeiro, a tourist was killed by police at a checkpoint because her car didn't stop. The mindset of shooting first and asking questions later is ingrained in police departments everywhere. That said, though, I want to give you a comment from a former police officer, one we saw a little bit earlier. This is Derek Waller, who says, being a police officer is not an easy task. No officer leaves his house and says, today I'm going to choke or shoot someone to death, but it continues to happen. An outside agency needs to do the investigations, and officers need to be held more accountable for their actions. Where do you see this conversation going from here?
I mean, there is plenty of conversation around police reform. I think that where we're seeing the best conversation happen is in places like Newark, New Jersey, places like Jackson, Mississippi, where they're talking holistically about reimagining public safety. And so in cities like Newark, led by Raz Baraka, they're willing to invest dollars in crime prevention and intervention rather than overspending on police. I think that the commenter on YouTube is absolutely right that police are trained to see us, especially in particular communities, as targets. If we could go into the entire history of policing in this country, which, an international audience might not be aware of, but American policing evolved out of the system of slave catching. So what we see now as officers, police officers, initially began in the United States as paddy rollers. So they were trained and to target Black people who were running away from their plantations and bring them back to their plantation owners. And I know that people will say, well, that's a long time ago, but we always need to look at the roots of institutions, because some institutions require transformation, not just reform.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'll end here with this tweet. This is from you, Matt. This is to the daughter of Eric Garner, Erica. Thank you so much. You were so important to helping me understand your father and his case and what wasn't being said or done. Erica couldn't join us for this conversation, but she's been tweeting out the link to this show, so we thank her for that and for keeping this in the news. The book is I Can't Breathe, A Killing on Bay Street. That's all the time we have here, but I want to thank Matt Taibbi and Melina Abdullah, and of course our community for joining us. As always, you can watch the stream live on YouTube, and we'll try to get your comments comments and questions live in on the air on the next show. Conversation continues online with hashtag AJStream.